Welcome to part one of Religious Pluralism in Gaudiya Vedanta. This is a three-part series that I will be sharing once per week, accompanying a series of articles that will be publishing once a week. For those for whom reading an article may be a little too long, I will try to provide a summarized version of each one of those three articles in this weekly series of videos. So the first part of a series of articles is called Polymorphic Monotheism and its Infinite Counterparts. Now, don't leave me. I know the term sounds a little bit clumsy and complicated. Polymorphic monotheism, we'll try to say something about it. That's the main topic of the first article, where I start trying to mention a little bit my story as a seeker and how much I was always drawn to this notion, without knowing it as such, of unity in diversity that somehow represents the foundational metaphysics of my tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnavism or Gaudiya Vedanta, the particular approach to Vedanta, to the ultimate knowledge from the school of Sri Chaitanya Dev. Acintya-bheda-abheda, unity in diversity. That was something that was intuitively present in my heart before officially aligning with this particular school, and in my search for the truth and studying different sages and authors and traditions, always this has been there, very, very present. As a friend of mine will say, gold wherever you find it, right? If gold comes in the garbs of a Franciscan monk, or wisdom, or a piece of Sufi mysticism, or in Hindu lineage, whatever is gold, it's gold. So embrace it. We will call it in our tradition saragrahis, essence seeker. Whatever an essential expression of reality, of truth is manifest, we are to embrace it. We are to cultivate that type of greed that makes us such essence seekers that no matter the external forms, will be able to detect and embrace essence whatever it comes. So our teacher Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda will emphasize this idea of saragrahi. All of us are meant and invited to become essence seekers. There is a form, there is relativity, there is packaging in the delivery of the teaching, but there is essence brimming inside, and we are to contact that essential principle. So truth is to be recognized despite its forms, its many forms, its endless forms. Truth is the principle, the active principle behind the many forms. So in one sense, there's no single tradition, and this is a teaching from my tradition, Gaudiya Vedanta. There's no single tradition who can monopolize the infinite. Again, we are trying to say something about the infinite, how much we can colonize it, monopolize it, claim exclusivity in relation to the endless absolute. By definition, that makes absolutely no sense. So this series of articles is an attempt to sober and humble our own approach to infinity. So in terms of Gaudiya Vedanta, my particular tradition, chosen tradition, though, again, at the same time, I love to connect with the essence of every mystical tradition. So I like to say my affiliation with Gaudiya Vedanta has to be in such a way that I can and still participate and feel part of the essence of other mystical schools. That cannot be out of the picture. So the acintya-bheda-abheda, or paradoxical and simultaneous unity in diversity, that forms the foundation of Gaudiya Vedanta. For me, it's a perfect non-sectarian template to approach reality, right? At least that's how it looks initially, as I mentioned in my article. Eventually, unfortunately, I realized that there are some unfortunate misrepresentations of this very broad-minded, deep, accommodating metaphysics. And unfortunately, in the name of Veda, in the name of unity and diversity, we end up having more diversity than unity, more dualistic thinking than an all-encompassing, non-dual accommodation of all these different facets of reality, many times leading to triumphalism. Right? My tradition is the best. Mine is the creme de la creme. Mine is higher than yours. But we forget to conclude those sentences with "for me." right? My tradition is the best for me. For me. So that has led to lots of trouble. But fortunately, by the grace of the Sweet Absolute, I've been able generally always to realize, okay, this is a misrepresentation of the actual teaching. The actual teaching is very clear about its generous, open, wide, accommodating embrace of so many approaches. Krishna the Gita says 4:11, however someone approaches me, the infinite, non-dual absolute, I will respond accordingly. So he's not saying there's only way to approach me, and that's the only way I can reciprocate. There is no other way. And that includes different traditions, different mystical approaches to the infinite. So according to each person's approach, that's highly super individualized and specific. Each particular nuance and flavor from the individual will be correspondingly reciprocated with the divine. And in every book in our tradition, Brihad-bhagavatamrita will say every mood of devotion and love is dear to God. Chaitanya Charitamrita very similarly will express in whatever way someone knows the divine. In that way, one will speak about the divine, which makes sense. And all possibilities exist in the infinite. And none of them are false. Every devotee will feel my particular approach to the divine is the best for me. And every devotee, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita will say, every devotee is right, is correct. So there is one single divine reality. In a personal, radically personal tradition like ours, I will say, where there is a monotheism, there is one God, one divine reality, but it is expressed in a variety of ways. So then we come to this a little bit sophisticated, complex terminology, polymorphic monotheism. Monotheism means mono, once, theos, God, in polymorphic, morphing or appearing in poly, many forms. To one same, undivided, non-dual wholeness. One same reality, the ultimate reality, expressing, reciprocating in endless ways. Bhagavad Puran in our tradition, also known as Srimad Bhagavatam, will say Bahumurti Ekamurtikam. Ekamurtikam, one form, Bahumurti, in many forms. Asankhya, uncountable. Uncountable are the expressions of the infinite. So again, we are not here to limit the infinite, to put him, her, them in boxes and say only this is the only way, this is the only tradition, this is the only possible approach, this is the only possible name to address the divine, this is the only possible form. All that will be just probably unresolved childhood trauma projected onto the infinite, trying to limit, trying to colonize, trying to monopolize out of fear. But at the end of the day, we are dealing here with something always bigger than ourselves. And in the Gaudiya tradition, this is particularly made clear in the very first book of the tradition, written after the demise of its founder, Sri Chaitanya. The book is called Brihad-bhagavatamrita. And there we find the journey, theological, existential journey of Sri Gopakumar, a seeker par excellence who ultimately longs to relate to Krishna, the Sweet Absolute, in terms of pure friendship, Sakhya Bhav. But in the context of him consummating his connection with the Absolute, he goes through different experiences with different worshippers, with different lovers of the divine, who address God in different moods, in different ways, different religions. The whole book is an interfaith treatise, if you will, of a seeker meeting different seekers and appreciating their moods and incorporating, acquiring some scars or deep impressions that inform his journey. Though his journey, again, concludes at the feet of divine friendship with God in the form of Sri Krishna. But nonetheless, he's not rejecting all these other different moods and approaches to the divine as different, inferior, whatever, non-bona fide heretic, but he is paying close attention how each lover is loving the beloved and acquiring some scars that nuance and nourish his own particular flavor of devotion. So this is the very first book of our tradition who somehow puts in context how we are supposed to represent it, live it, experience it. Many devotional moods, all of them being honored, all of them being somehow integrated, one being nourished by them. So illustrating a non-hierarchical approach to the diversity in the religious world, a non-hierarchical appreciation, even within unacknowledged, as we will see, personal taste, right? Again, I have this particular call. That's the best for me. But the best for someone else could be something else. And I'm willing and happy to acknowledge that and celebrate that and be nourished by that. That's what I like to call, as I refer in my second book, Radical Personalism, as theological cross-pollination. There you have it, another clumsy term. Cross-pollination, like the work of different species, bringing pollen and nectar from one flower to another and transmitting and creating very unique new mixtures and nourished forms of nourishment. So theological cross-pollination in the context of God, of the divine, another way of saying interfaith dialogue, but somehow that expression carries some assumptions and biases which are not always the most favorable, for at least for me. So I like the expression of cross-pollination. We are all working, bringing different forms of nectar, of pollen to nourish each other and to make new, unique combinations tasteful for all of us. And that we find again in our own tradition, Gaudiya Vedanta, one of its main books, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami writes this book. We may deem it a very orthodox Gaudiya Vedantic treatise, but the main structure of the book is taken from cross-pollination, taken from Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra, a book on aesthetics, in the context of speaking about rasa, sacred rapture. Rupa Goswami borrows, if you will, this structure of rasa, and he adapts it to the notion of bhakti rasa, devotional sacred rapture. But there's a cross-pollination going on there. Similarly, Srila Jiva Goswami, one of the main, if not the main theologian of Gaudiya Vedanta, in his famous Shat-sandarbha, sixfold treatise, he's referring to other teachers, to other saints, to other sages from other traditions, from other religions, if you will, such as Madhva, Ramanuja, even Shankaracharya, who at times he will try to refute, but at times he will quote it to support some of his points. That's acknowledging his contribution. So in that way, we can see, this is just a few examples, but how our tradition, and any tradition ideally, in my opinion, thrives through dialogue, through cross-pollination, through allowing ourselves to be nourished by diversity, not through isolation, not through alienation, not through triumphalism, exclusivity, further division, further dualism. We have enough already, please. And enough already being invoked in the name of God and in the name of religion. So we need to reconcile, redeem, heal those wounds. So theological cross-pollination, please, not mere religious tolerance. Like I'm just tolerating you. I'm doing you a favor by tolerating you, who are different from me, who are from that other tradition. No. I'm being enriched by you. Therefore, I'm indebted to you. I want to reciprocate somehow. So other traditions can deepen and fertilize, if you will, our own practice, our own understanding of our tradition. That's what has happened to me, at least personally, and how I was able to rediscover my own tradition by the help and grace, dare to say, of other traditions. And that's why when that happened, I no longer feel comfortable saying other traditions, but actually sister traditions. How much can we draw a thick line between schools and say other? Again, going to Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda, one of our teachers, he will emphasize, when you go and visit some other place of worship, a mosque, a church, depending the tradition you are affiliated with, you should appreciate, wow, they are loving my beloved in this particular way, which is so different, but at the same time, I can see the foundation of unity, that we are actually loving the same divine person. So I can be nourished by that, and I can appreciate that. I do not need to breed hostility, but I can be nourishing my own flavor of devotion by witnessing other people's approach. In the beginning, this may not be possible. For a newcomer, for a beginner, it's too much to accommodate, too much diversity to deal with. We may need first to be properly rooted in our tradition, and with proper boundaries for the small sprout to grow beyond the boundaries, beyond the fence, when it's properly rooted down and can see what's outside of the fence. But at some point, we all need to reach that healthy place. Whatever fences or walls or lines, so to say, that divide us or make a clear boundary between this is something called Sufism, this is something called Buddhism, this is something called Christianity, this is something called Gaudiya Vedanta, or whatever. Even those walls, if you want to call them such, we can use them to communicate with one another. This is the beautiful analogy that Simon Weil gave, and I quote in my article, first part of the article that we are discussing here. And she will say, two people are on two sides of the wall, two prisoners, and the wall is dividing them, but they're using the wall and knocking on the wall in different ways to speak with one another. So the very same thing that creates a division can facilitate communication. So those very lines that somehow demarcate the difference between one sister tradition and the other, those same lines or walls can enable dialogue, can facilitate proximity. So again, differences between religions can be a very good reason to enter into dialogue, to communicate with one another, to make a point of connection. So Gaudiya Vedanta, in that way, affirms validity in different mystical schools, all as genuine responses to the infinite. Beyond Hinduism, again, it's not like, okay, Bahumurti, Kamurtikam, there is Krishna, there is Ram, there is Sri Chaitanya, there is Vishnu, etc. There is the Dasavatar, the Panchatattva. There are all these different forms of the Absolute as revealed in the Vedic canon, so to say. But what to speak about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, no, that's not bona fide. No, that's not the point here. This goes beyond Sanatan Dharma tradition, or beyond Hinduism, as we would like to call it, beyond Vedic schools. We affirm validity and recognize the genuineness of all these other different traditions that we know as main world religions. So this is the nature of plurality, right? In divine will, in divine existence, plurality is a very natural principle, along with unity, Bheda-abheda, unity, plurality, singularity, plurality, unity, diversity. There's no one single religion that is the only possible, best, ideal window of opportunity for all of us. I quote in my article a line from Friedrich Schwann, one of the famous perennialists, if we may like to use that term, and he will say, if only one single religion or tradition will be the actual, real, bona fide one, and everything else will be a fake placebo of that, it will be so powerful. It's only actually is the truth. It will be so powerful that it will attract all in that direction. It will be basically irresistible for the whole of humanity to surrender in that unique direction. So the fact that that's not the case, the fact that there's considerable plurality, reveals the infinite's variety and willingness to express in a variety of ways, which of course doesn't mean any and every expression is genuine. There can be, of course, concocted distortions, but at the same time, we should not go to the other extreme either. Only this is the one best possible way for everyone. Maybe for me, but not for everyone. So this is a conclusion of part 1 of my article on polymorphic monotheism and how Gaudiya Vedanta celebrates endless devotional expressions and divine manifestations in terms of devotional worship of God. In the next part of this series, in the next article and in the next video accompanying that article, part 2, we'll be exploring the relationship between Gaudiya Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta, or monism, or sometimes called impersonalism, which many times is seen as opposed to monotheistic devotional worship. How opposed is personalism to impersonalism? Is there a chance to encompass both? Is there a place for both in transcendence? We'll explore that in our next video. Till then, have a blessed day.